All right, welcome. We are going to start a project with the new tech of slabs. If you haven't worked with slabs before, we're going to be working with it today. We're going to be working on mugs, and then we're going to be transforming them into sculpture mugs. So the first thing you're going to need is some tools, a large amount of clay, and a piece of blank white paper. If you're one of my students and you're using one of the small blocks, I recommend that you grab extra clay from one of the large blocks, and you want to use a fairly large amount. I think last time I talked about a softball size. We're going to add a little bit more because I noticed that some people were struggling with just the softball size amount. You will also need to be working on a level, hard surface. The surface needs to be porous. So if you're working on glass or tile or sealed wood, you need to make sure that you either lay some fabric down to work on, or you clean some concrete nearby and you can work on the concrete floor. Cutting boards work really well for these projects. So make sure your surface is porous, meaning it can soak up moisture. Okay, we do not want sleek surfaces because the clay will stick. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with step one. It's going to feel like an earthquake because there's going to be a lot of smacking. So let's get our aggression out and let's get pumped. All right, first off, I'm going to start with my prepared and wedged piece of clay. If you don't remember wedging, it's posted in a previous video. Please go watch that video. So I have this prepared large amount of clay. Normally I would start with something about this size, but given that this is a little bit difficult, if you've never worked with slabs before, we're going to work with a little bit extra, so that way there's no hardships. Okay, so this has been wedged and compacted. And I'm going to set it aside right now because I need to get my piece of paper. We're going to use this white sheet of paper. And we're going to fold it in half, what I call hot dog style, so long ways. Okay. And this is going to be our rectangle template that we're going to end up cutting our slab out of. So we like to have this ready while we're preparing the clay, so that we have a good idea of how big we need to make everything. Okay, first off, this is much longer and this is much shorter. So I'm going to squeeze this into a log so it's roughly that length before I flatten the clay out. So you can smack it or you can squeeze it. If you're squeezing, make sure you rotate it as you squeeze. Okay, you don't want to do just a giant squeeze in the middle because that's going to cause problems for you later down the road. Okay, if you're smacking, rotate it as you smack, and that'll lengthen the log out. Okay, we're a little bit closer. Let's check it against our template. It's still a little bit more narrow, so we're going to go a little bit wider. Rotation, squeeze, rotation, squeeze, rotation, squeeze. Okay, and that's close enough. Okay, it's okay that there's a little bit out. The clay will continue to stretch. Okay, first step is on a dry, porous surface. We're going to work with this log, and we're going to smack, pause, flip, smack, pause, flip, smack. And as we smack, you can see the clay is getting wider and longer. Okay, it is already the right length. Now we're going to shoot for width. These are the target areas, these corners right here, because those are usually the hardest ones to smack out, and you need to get all the way to the corners. So to make sure you have good directionality, when you smack going forward, instead of smacking up and down, we're going to smack side. Okay, so starting high, landing low, and we're only going to be using this flat center of our palm, not our fingers. Your fingers leave a lot of deep impressions, and we don't want that. We want it to be as flat as possible. So we're going to do side smacks, targeted side smacks, You see I'm stretching out these two areas. I'm going to flip it. Okay. Flip again. Okay. And flip again. Flipping regularly prevents your surface from getting overhydrated and the clay sticking. When the clay sticks, it pretty much doesn't work anymore. Okay, so this is just about there, but my clay is super, super thick. So we don't want it to be quite this thick. I'm going to thin it out. I have plenty of room for this. Okay, I'm going to take one of my wooden tools, and I'm going to just cut off one edge, and I want to look at the thickness. So this is still really, really thick. This is a popsicle stick. It's about the width of a popsicle stick. Okay, and it's a little bit wider than a pencil. This is a really thick slab, so I want to squeeze it a little bit flatter, so it's just a little bit narrower than the width of this popsicle stick, but not quite as narrow as the width of this pencil. So we're very, very close. Flip. I'm going to go ahead and cut off another strip and see how much progress we've made. Okay. So it's a little bit narrower than the popsicle stick. You can see the popsicle stick edge popping up on the side a little bit. And it's still slightly thicker than the pencil. Okay, so this is fine. This is a good thickness. I'm going to go ahead and position my slab in front of me, and I need my credit card rib. I'm going to be using a wet credit card rib because the clay that I'm using is a very crunchy sculpture clay, and we're going to ask it to bend in a circle. When you ask this type of clay to bend in a circle, it has a tendency to crack. Okay, so to prevent these cracks, we're just to make sure we keep as much moisture in it as possible. So I'm going to take my credit card rib, which this is a CVS card, and dunk it in some water. And I'm going to wipe diagonally one direction. And then I'm going to wipe diagonally the other direction. Don't push so hard that it thins your clay out a whole bunch. Just hard enough, and then back the first direction. Just hard enough that you can actually smooth it out and get rid of the lumps and the bumps. When we smack the clay, we have separated the platelets that make up the clay. So there's little hexagonal platelets that make up clay. And when you smack it, you twist it, you bend it, you do all these things to it, the platelets separate and go in, and they're not aligned anymore. So when we take our credit card rib and we smooth it out and we add a little bit of pressure, this is something called compression. And what it does is it takes those misaligned platelets and it aligns them back up. Okay, so now they're like this instead of all cattywampus. So we want them to line back up. Why is this step important? Well, clay has memory. Okay, and if you don't do this compression and ribbing, then it will remember what you've done to it, the smacking. And when you fire it in the kiln, it looks flat, but when you fire it, it'll remember and go wah, and bend up and be twisted. Okay, so whatever you're making that's supposed to be flat or a specific form, it won't be that form anymore because the platelets aren't aligned. Okay, so I've compressed one side. I'm going to gently pick this slab up. I'm going to put one hand underneath and one hand on top and lift up, 2 flat hands, and gently lay it down. Now that we have this large flat piece of clay, it needs to be treated with lots of care, and you need to be very gentle with it, okay? Because clay has memory. It will remember every bend and everything you do to it. All right. I don't know if you guys can see, but I have a big old air bubble right here. Let's see if I can get you to see this. Right here, there is a blemish, and this is an air bubble. So to get rid of air bubbles, I take a pokey tool. This is a pencil with a toothpick taped to the end, and I'm going to just pop it. And then I'm going to take my rib and compress over it, and that will erase the air bubble. Okay. So I've got my slab. Make sure it's really nicely compressed. I compressed one side, then I flipped it and I compressed the other. Now my surface is a little bit moist, and that's all right as long as it's not wet. Okay. I'm going to take my paper template. I will need another piece of slab as we continue to move through this. So I'm going to do my best to save and preserve a chunk over here off to the side. So I have more than enough clay to work with this, and I'm going to try to save this piece. So when I'm going to use this popsicle stick that I took a sandpaper to and turn it into a little knife, I'm going to hold the paper down and cut this direction straight towards my body, okay? And that way you'll get the straightest cut. And when you stand up, you tend to get even straighter cuts. So now I want to keep this piece of slab for later in the project, so I'm going to set it off to the side. I'm going to rotate this slab, keeping the paper pinched, gently, gently. Try not to distort it. Okay. And look, I distorted it a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to cut at the top, going back towards my body so I get as many straight cuts as possible. Nice and slow, nice and slow. If you go too fast, you're more likely to mess up. I'm going to take this slab, and there's my thickness. You guys can see just roughly how thick it is. And then I'm going to take this one, and remove that. I'm going to very gently as I can, 2 flat hands, place this, and I have one more edge to cut. I'm going to go ahead and cut this edge. I'm going to realign my paper, make sure that it's lined up with my previous cuts because it moved slightly while I was rotating my slab. And I'm going to just drag it straight towards my body. Okay. And this paper we will use again later, so don't throw it out, save it. We're going to keep it off to the side. So now I have this slab. After cutting, I'm going to just gently lift it. I want to inspect to see if there's a nice edge on the long side and an ugly edge on the other side. The nice edge we're going to designate as the rim, the end that we drink out of, and the ugly edge, whichever edge that is going to be the bottom because it'll get hidden. So I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to inspect the other side and see if there are any issues. So both sides look relatively even. I still think this is the nicer edge. So to start forming the lip or the drinking part of the mug, I'm going to take my finger and very gently just touch that corner. I'm not pushing, I'm just touching. And that sort of compressed that corner a little bit. I'm going to do it 2 or 3 times. very gently, and it's going to start to round it off. We want this corner to be a round rolled rim. Okay, so I'm going to lift this, flip it over, and do the other side. 2 and 3. Okay, so we're going to compare. I'm going to just gently set this up. We're going to compare what it looks like when you have a treated rim versus an untreated rim. Okay, so this is a treated rim. It's smooth, it's rolled, there's no sharp edges. This is what it looks like when it's cut. You see how this is sharp and there's edges to it? That's not going to be pleasant to drink out of. So you need to make sure it's a smooth, pleasant rim. And this is where the drinker is going to be interacting with this piece. So you need to make sure you think about the drinker while you're working on this piece. We're going to pause the video here, or actually stop here, and I'll start part 2 next.